Okay, everyone, welcome so much and thank you for joining AARP's California Climate Chats conversation for today. Really excited to have you all on. My name is David Azevedo. I'm an Associate State Director with AARP California. And again, thank you for spending the next hour with us. We have a great conversation set up with several panelists that are covering a new set of recycling laws that are going to be affecting all of us here. So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, thank you for joining us, especially for this critical conversation on how climate change is affecting older adults' health, wealth, and self. On the California team for AARP, our team works hard to deliver results for our over 3.3 million members in the Golden State, working on important quality of life issues in healthcare, retirement security, and age-friendly communities. This is the fourth episode of our Climate Chat series. If you haven't had the chance to check out our other episodes on air quality, extreme heat, and drought, we have each episode available to view on our AARP California YouTube channel. On today's episode, we're going to talk trash. In our Golden State, where people from all over the world come for our beaches, mountains, and Disneyland, landfills are the least visited attractions. But these landfills, specifically the decomposition of our trash, are a huge source of methane. Methane is a harmful gas substance with negative impacts to the health of humans on both an individual and planetary scale. Since 2007, methane has sharply increased worldwide. Longtime Californians may not be surprised to hear that methane is a supercharged superheater of the atmosphere. In the same time frame from 2007 to the present day, we have seen extreme heat days increase exponentially, along with worsening wildfire seasons and drought conditions. Methane also contributes to the formation of smog, which is linked with diseases such as asthma and other respiratory issues, many of which disproportionately affect older adults. These problems, of course, aren't easy to hear, especially when at the end of the day, you and I are the reason why we have landfills in the first place. Our trash has to go somewhere. But we're here today not to be hopeless. We're here today to be hopeful. A new law called Senate Bill 1383, or SB 1383 for short, is helping us achieve that hopefulness by giving us the tools to not only decrease methane emissions from landfills, but at the same time produce something useful and valuable in the process. SB 1383 aims to drastically reduce the amount of methane produced from our trash, specifically organic waste disposal. You're going to hear this term, organic waste, a lot during our conversation today. It's effectively things like coffee grounds, banana peels, apple cores, and other food scraps that we throw away. When this type of organic waste isn't processed properly in landfills, methane is produced. SB 1383 was passed to correct this problem and give waste management providers, businesses, local governments, and everyday Californians the right tools to fight methane emissions from our trash bins to our landfills. In today's Climate Chats, you'll get a chance to learn more about this new law and ask questions about how you can help us achieve a better future for generations of Californians to come. A generation with cleaner, healthier air to breathe, less extreme weather, and a lifestyle that is more in tune with nature. With that, let's get started. First, let me introduce my co-moderator for today's panel, AARP member and AARP volunteer, Bob Pratt. Bob, great to have you on.
Hey, thanks, David. And I'm a longtime AARP community volunteer specializing in our Livable Communities for All Ages movement. Composting, which we're going to talk about today, is not new to our members. It's been around for thousands of years. It was advocated by wise land use leaders like Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and my grandmother. So these days, it continues to gain popularity among our AARP members as a simple way to reuse waste, save money, and participate in the booming organic gardening movement. On the lesser known side, composting, instead of just letting food rot in landfills, reduces methane production, as you have said, and which is a greenhouse gas, and that robs our lungs of oxygen capacity and contributes to pulmonary disorders. And those are the third biggest cause of premature death in older Californians. So for our 3.2 million California members, composting is really not just a fad, it's a serious win on many fronts. David?
Great. Thank you so much, Bob. All right. So for today's event format, we're going to be talking for about a little less than a half hour here with our three panelists, which I'll introduce right now. So the first panelist is Chris Sini. He's the Director of Organics for Republic Services. In this role, he supports all of Republic Services organic facilities across the country, leads the development of new organics infrastructure, and spends a lot of time supporting the California team with implementing SB 1383. Welcome, Chris. Our next panelist is Chase DeFelicio, who is a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle, who serves on their transformation team, where he covers tech culture, workplace safety, and labor issues in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and beyond. Prior to joining the Chronicle, he covered immigration for the Daily Journal, a legal affairs newspaper, and a variety of beats at the North Bay Business Journal in Santa Rosa. And finally, Amanda Smith is also from Republic Services. She's a recycling coordinator and works to help Republic Services be an industry leader in U.S. recycling and non-hazardous solid waste disposal. She works within San Diego County to provide educational outreach to residents and property owners regarding waste services, waste diversion, and regulatory compliance. Amanda holds a degree in communication with minors in sustainability and science and risk communication from Cal Poly. All right, so we're going ahead and hand the mic over to Bob to ask our first question. And if you have any questions throughout this entire process, feel free to use the Q&A feature on your webinar on Zoom. It should be listed there at the bottom of your toolbar. But that's where we'd love to collect your questions throughout this panel. We'll be having the last 15 minutes reserved of this hour to be able to answer your questions. So Bob, take it away.
All right. Chase, thanks again for being here, and thanks again for putting together such an insightful article in the San Francisco Chronicle about California's new recycling laws. You pointed out that this is the largest overhaul of the California trash industry since 1980s. Can you talk a bit about your experience in putting the article together, how to understand the game changer that SB 1383 represents for us, particularly when you got a close-up look personally at one of our major composting sites? Chase?
Well, thanks, Bob, and thank you all for having me. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I think this is really a gargantuan undertaking by the state, really at all levels of the food system, starting with everyday Californians like myself, and then going all the way up to the farm ecosystem, and then to places like the composting facility in Vernalis, California, in San Joaquin County, where I went, to kind of get a sense of the scale of this change and what it takes just to function at the level it does now for San Francisco and other parts of the Bay Area. Went there for a day to Vernalis to see, just the amount of material that they're processing there. They take in about 1,500 tons every day of material, organic material, and some non-organic material from San Francisco, from other parts of the Bay Area. They take in, trucks that have about 25 tons of this organic material, food waste, what have you, put them up on giant lifts at almost a vertical angle, dump this stuff out, giant tractors and equipment to move it around. And it looks like almost an airfield, the amount of space that they have. It's many acres, material for equipment for moving, turning, aerating, sorting, and the amount of people power that is required to run a facility like that. And that's just one section of the state. Obviously, San Francisco has been working with municipal composting for a long time, more than 20 years. So there's a little bit of a situation where they've built out that infrastructure so far, but it gives you a sense of that's just one section of this. And in order to build this out for the entire state, I mean, there's going to be a lot more that needs to be built, facilities like that, and expanded in the coming years to make sure that we can actually hit the goals that are set forth in this pretty ambitious law.
Okay, thanks.
Fantastic. So next we're going to turn to Chris and Amanda. And I guess, so Chris, we know that we have a couple slides from you that you would like to share as we start with you. So while you get that started up on your screen, could you just first tell us what it means to be a director of organics for Republic Services, and how are you supporting Republic's California team with implementing SB 1383?
All right, David, you should be able to see my screen. So again, I appreciate the invite. Republic Services really appreciates the opportunity to talk with everyone here today. What you're looking at is our newest compost facility in San Diego. It's technically in Chula Vista, California. What is it like to be Director of Organics Operations? I've been in the organic space, working in organics, composting, green waste diversion, food waste diversion for over 20 years in California. So I've seen the industry come a long way in quite a bit of time, and we have a long way to go, as Chase points out. I support all of our organics operations across the country and lead the development of all new infrastructure within organics. So what does that mean? In California, we operate 6 compost facilities today, 3 in Northern California, 3 in Southern California. That makes Republic one of the largest composters in the state, and we compost approximately 2,000 tons per day, or 4 million pounds of green waste and food waste every single day. So it is on a very large scale, like Chase had pointed out. We do have quite a long ways to go, to meet SB 1383 goals. The state estimates we need 100 to 150 more compost facilities, anaerobic digestion facilities in the state. So that's where I spend a lot of my time, developing organics infrastructure and working very closely with our partner jurisdictions, our customers per se. We have about 90 different cities that we're the franchise hauler for, and we work very closely with all of them to make sure they're in compliance with 1383.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. So next I'll turn to your colleague at Republic Services, Amanda. So Amanda, you're a recycling coordinator based in the San Diego region. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with implementing SB 1383 in your communities that you work with?
Yeah, of course. For Republic Services, and also just as one of the key functions of SB 1383, public education and outreach is really a keystone of the success of the regulation. So that's where my role as a recycling coordinator comes in. Different jurisdictions will have different approaches to this regulation, of course, and they will also have different forms of outreach for it. But in the area where I work, myself and a team of recycling coordinators for Republic Services are conducting outreach to commercial, multifamily, and single-family properties in order to get those businesses, those apartment buildings, those single-family homes in compliance with this regulation. And like Chase said, it's a really ambitious regulation, but the success of it will really come from the education and the patience of understanding that this is asking for a lot of behavior change moving forward. And that's where I come in. I have conversations with people day in and day out. I actually just came back from a series of waste assessments where I was going out and speaking with business owners on it. And so I'm really here to have those discussions with people and field the questions that a lot of people have regarding it.
Great, thank you so much for that. And thanks, Chris and Amanda, for starting us out there. I'll turn it back over to Bob for his next question to Chase.
Hi, Chase. In your coverage of 1383 implementation, what was your general impression of the scale of the problem we're trying to solve with these new recycling laws? And what's your feeling about us from what you saw about us being up to this in California?
So the scale is massive, I think is the best way to describe it at the outset. And where we are now is we're behind. The idea is that CalRecycle is estimating that something like 100 new facilities will have to be built. That's not just composting facilities. That's going to take the form of aerobic digesters and other types of equipment that go into this to reduce food waste. And they're looking at something like handling 20 million tons of organic waste annually that would otherwise end up in landfills. The idea for this legislation, which was passed years ago, was to cut down by about half, and then again by 75% by 2025, how much of this organic waste ends up in landfills. According to CalRecycle, we're behind there. We're even behind on the cutting down by half level. So it's not something that we cannot do. It doesn't mean it's impossible. And you know, now that this is the law of the land, CalRecycle is really working a lot more directly with a lot of jurisdictions throughout the state, of which there are 450 waste jurisdictions to basically get them on track. And last year, there's also a law that got passed that gives those jurisdictions, cities, counties, what have you, a little bit of leeway if they ask for it and need it, because of this, largely because of the coronavirus pandemic, to work with CalRecycle to get their programs in order. I mean, the good news is that it's not like we're totally starting from scratch. A lot of these jurisdictions, about 300 of them, already have commercial programs to reroute organic waste for businesses and restaurants. There's yard waste bins that a lot of people are already familiar with throughout the state. It's largely that you know, residential green bins and the kind of the waste stream from curbside to a compost facility like the one in Vernalis that needs to be built out a lot more. I mean, the flip side of that is that this also costs money. CalRecycle doesn't really know exactly how much this is going to cost. The estimates run into the tens of billions, depending on who you ask. The original law, 1383, didn't have a funding stream in there, but the state legislature has been setting aside money, more than $100 million during the last legislative session, in the form of grants for infrastructure and things of that nature. So it's not like it's something that you can just flip a switch and do. We have till 2025 to try to meet some of these the most ambitious goals outlined in the law. We'll see if that happens. And the state is really committed to working directly with a lot of these waste jurisdictions to make this possible. So we are behind, but it's not so far behind that we can't make up the ground.
Okay, thanks. And we'll come back to that, I'm sure, Dave.
Yes, no, definitely. And it already seems that we're getting lots of great questions in the Q&A. Again, reminder for folks that I'm more than happy to take your questions and answers for this session with our panelists today. So feel free to use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen here. So we're going to go next now back to Chris and Amanda. So again, Chris and Amanda, thanks again for being able to join us and have two very different parts of Republic Services to speak about. So Chase just spent some time discussing how transformational these new recycling laws are. And Chris and Amanda, you at Republic Services are on the front lines of making this transformation happen, particularly on the side of educating consumers like us in our individual capacities, but also businesses and big organizations. Can each of you, and we'll start with Chris, can you talk about how each of your jobs and your perspectives there tackles this tough problem of education?
Yeah, David, first I'm just going to tack on one thing that Chase had said, to put it in perspective for everyone, because we both mentioned how many facilities are needed, the magnitude of, how much capacity for organics recycling we need in the state. We currently compost approximately 6 million tons a year in the entire state of California. You've heard now Chase and I say we need 100 to 150 more, so we need, a level of 3 times as many facilities as we have now. Just to put it in perspective, that always helps people understand the magnitude of the challenge ahead, but the goals that they're trying to achieve. And that's a lot of organic waste that they're pulling out of the landfill, massive, massive amounts. So I always like to point that out. So, as far as education, the one thing, because I've seen 4 or 5 questions on this topic already that I want to make sure to get across to everyone is SB 1383 is a state requirement on every jurisdiction in the state of California. It's not a requirement on, specific hauler or any specific company. It is actually a requirement on every jurisdiction. And then it's the jurisdiction's responsibility to enforce SB 1383 on, residents and businesses within that jurisdiction. So I always want to make sure everyone understands that, because I get a lot of questions, about why Republic hasn't done X, Y, Z, or another waste hauler. So getting back to your question in regards to education, what we're seeing in our 90 to 95 franchises in the state, it's a very different approach from some of the cities than others. And I don't know if any two are the same in our 90 to 95 franchise contracts. So the approach to education can be very different, even in two cities that neighbor each other, as far as who's doing the education. Is it the hauler? Is it the city? The city has the ability to make all of those decisions, and really, pull it out to the customers, whether it's on the residential side or the commercial side. I'll let Amanda talk to some of the specifics, on contamination and what she's doing around education. But for the most part, everyone on here at the home should be seeing a 3 containers solution. That's what we're seeing predominantly throughout the whole state. So a trash, recycling, and an organics container. At the home, what that means is you have an organics container for green waste, but the new change with SB 1383 is now you're going to put food waste in that green waste. So that's the change at the resident or the home. At the business, now you're going to have the same thing: a trash container, a recycling container, and an organics container. Now, what goes in that organics container at every restaurant, hotel, grocery store? It's predominantly commercial food waste. Next to no green waste that's typically collected by a third party. So those are the 3 streams at the resident and the business that we're really focusing in on, and that is going to be what everyone's going to see on this call. And maybe I'll pass it to Amanda as far as some of the specific education tools that she's using in the communities.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that one of the main challenges is that jurisdictions differ depending on where you are. I went to school up in San Luis Obispo, and if I went there, then the recycling and organics, what would be accepted would likely be different than what I'm seeing down here. And so different parts of the state and different regions, depending on the facility where the organics is going to be going to, it can differ depending on where you are, especially when it comes to what may or may not be accepted in the organic specifically. Some places might separate the food waste from the green waste. In other cases, the food waste and the green waste can be commingled in the same container. That's why when I go out and do waste assessments, if I'm speaking with a business owner who maybe owns a business in